Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Greetings from the Regional Resource Center for Asia and the Pacific at the Asian Institute of Technology, Bangkok. It is my pleasure to address you all as a guest lecturer that supports the taught course ME6509 Materials and Sustainability at the Department of Mechanical Engineering, College of Design and Engineering, National University of Singapore. Let me get my presentation on. Yes, my topic of the presentation today would be enhancing climate resilience, and I would be talking you through this program, this topic with respect to a very interesting story. I first of all would like to apologize in advance for not being able to make it in person. If you have any questions, Professor Seeram could try to answer. If not, my email address is here, and you could always reach out to me, and I would try to answer to the best of my ability. Now, introducing myself, I head the climate change at the Regional Resource Center for Asia and the Pacific. I currently work with many UN organizations that are based from Bangkok, such as UNFCCC, GCF, UNDRR, UNEP, UN Habitat, ADPC, UNEP-PAPAN, SPREP, PCCC, UCLG, ICLE, IFRSC, IGES, NICE, ADB, EPICNet, GCOM, and GAPFAO of the World Bank and WMO. My PhD is in environmental and energy mechanical engineering from the University of Science and Technology, South Korea. And my Master of Engineering is from AIT, Energy Technology. My bachelor's is from University of Leeds, reading environmental energy engineering. So much like you, I come from an engineering background, and I've been working in the space of climate change, environmental sustainability, and I'd like to share you of what I can do, what the future holds for you, as well as to say a little bit more about myself. Pretty much, I was nominated for the IPCC experts to draft the outline for the 7th assessment report. Nominated for the IPCC experts to draft the outline for the special report on climate change in cities, IPCC. I was also an expert reviewer for special report on oceans and cryosphere in changing climate in June. I review for Bioresource Technology Journal, Bioresource Technology Reports, Journal of Fuel. I have published in Journal of Analytical Applied Pyrolysis, Korean Journal of Chemical Engineering, International Journal of Hydrogen Energy, Journal of Environmental Progress and Sustainable Energy, Journal of Materials Cycles and Waste Management. So recent professional experience, I have worked with FAO, which is the Food and Agricultural Organization, the World Bank, as an environmental consultant, executing sustainability and ESS mainstreaming in the big projects. I worked as IUCN, developing GCF concept notes and establishing programs. I worked with GIZ and GOPA on intergovernmental projects. So keeping it simple, my table of contents is going to be introduce you to climate change, which I believe everyone knows, but I'm just going to go through a little bit about something interesting. Hopefully deliver certain things that you didn't know or wasn't aware of. Then I go down to the definitions of this guest lecture, which is sustainability, resilience, and adaptation. I would then venture to talk about the Green Climate Fund, financing for climate resilience, and how the setup is there so that everyone is aware of these sort of, job opportunities and availabilities and what we're doing worldwide with respect to sustainability and taking it forward. I'm also going to talk about the work I'm doing, which is on adaptation workshops, tools, and platforms to enhance climate resilience. So let's get on with it. I would like to start off with the question of what is the relevance of climate resilience to mechanical engineering and sustainability? The topic of my discussion is to enhance climate resilience, which is mainly related to adapting to the changing climate. Our human story of how we adapted to the changing climate is the perfect example to internalize adaptation to climate change. And I will start from there. We humans have been highly robust in adapting to environmental instability, and we did it better than most of other animals and apes. Over the last few million years, our genus Homo biologically integrated through natural selection, structural and thermal regulatory adaptations that were favorable to the changing climate. Bipedalism, loss of body hair in exchange of sweat glands, skin pigmentation was some of the traits that enhanced our climate resilience. So, how many of you know who this is in the picture? So this is a famous fossil found 4.4 million years in Ethiopia called Adi. Adi stands for Ardipithecus ramidus, full Latin name of our extinct hominid ancestor. So it is the earliest known hominid fossil that have shown signs of walking upright, which is bipedalism. So that's the reason why it falls within our lineage of Homo. So 4 to 2 million years ago, in equatorial Africa, the environment got drier. The ecosystems gave way to grasslands and savanna plains at the expense of the tropical rainforests, which had a lot of big trees that our ancestors were living on. So we began to pretty much, get out of the trees and get down to the grasslands, executing many, many different types of, activities. So during this time, our ancestors began adaptation to the changing climate and its environmental, local environments, with various biological abilities to move around in diverse habitats by changing the degree of reliance on terrestrial walking, suited for grasslands, and arboreal climbing, which was suited for rainforests. And both these traits are executed by the chimpanzees as well. And about 2 to 1 million years ago, our recent law and Homo ancestor, Homo erectus, the first traveler outside Africa of our genus Homo, now walking upright completely, adapted to grasslands, mountains, and forests through bipedalism. It's about 2 to 1 million years ago, about the same time that we began to walk upright completely. Human ancestors lost their body hair in exchange of sweat glands that enabled better thermoregulation needed for the endurance, running, and long-distance walking demanded from the changing ecosystem. So we evolved a new system of thermocooling our bodies, much more advanced or much more better suited for the changing climate of the savanna and the grassland, which enabled us to run long distance through our thermocooling process, which is, in fact, when you think about it, very, very interesting with respect to what you're studying right now with respect to mechanical engineering courses of, structure and thermodynamics and so on and so forth. So these are the biological traits that we developed in adapting to the climate through natural selections and gene mutations. And it's a very interesting backstory to internalize how we adapted to the climate change. In the last million years, we took it a step further and began to use communication, social collectiveness, fire for cooking, materials trading, clothes, use of clothes, construction of shelters, and so on and so forth to enhance adaptation to the changing climate, which is also known in a nutshell for climate resilience. Supported by favorable change in the climate that suited our evolutionary adaptive traits, we became the most successful species that adapted to the changing climate. Our recent human story of biological adaptation to climate change may hold valuable hidden lessons along with a blueprint in combating the changing climate. So I hope I have touched upon something very interesting that would enable you to internalize what climate change, adaptation, and climate resilience really is. So climate change, what is climate change? Introduction to today's climate change is an interesting topic. So climate change refers to the long-term shifts in temperatures and weather patterns due to natural, which is sun's activities and large volcanic eruptions, and or anthropogenic activities, which is man-made. So the focus now, in our work related now, is mainly on the anthropogenic effects of climate change, which is we are pumping huge amounts of gases to the atmosphere, unprecedented in Earth's history. So we are taking it from the ground and pumping it to the atmosphere, which is the real cause of the issue. So this has unprecedented levels of global warming, which is now being combated. In today's context, climate change has been defined with respect to adapting and mitigating anthropogenic activities, as I said, that arose over the last 150 years from the onset of Great Britain's Industrial Revolution. That initiated the burning of fossil fuels, which was inside the ground, such as coal, crude oil, natural gas, shale. And we pumped it into the atmosphere. So burning of fossil fuels, generated greenhouse gases, which acts like a blanket wrapped around the Earth, trapping the sun's heat and raising temperatures. The main greenhouse gases are carbon dioxide and methane. Energy, industry, transport, buildings, agriculture, and land use are among the main sectors causing greenhouse gases. Most scholars agree limiting global temperature rise to no more than 1.5 degrees would help us avoid the worst climate impacts and maintain a livable climate. Yet, policies currently in place point to a much higher temperature rise by the end of the century, which is about 3 degrees. So emissions that cause climate change come from every part of the world and can be reduced or removed from any part of the world. Growing number of countries committing to net zero emissions by 2050, emissions must be cut off by half by 2030 to keep warming below 1.5 degrees. The Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, established by the World Meteorological Organization and the United Nations Environment Programme, UNEP, in 1988, is to advance scientific knowledge about climate change caused by human activities. The IPCC provides regular assessments of the scientific basis of climate change, its impacts and future risks and options for adaptation and mitigation. The latest assessment report is Assessment Report 6. So the adverse impacts on human-caused change, as described in this, will intensify. So human-caused change will intensify, affecting water security and food productions, affecting health and well-being of all people, affecting our cities, settlements, and infrastructure, affecting our ecosystem structure, species range, shifts and changes in time. However, our hope, we have hope in mainstreaming effective and equitable climate action now will reduce losses and damage for nature and people. Climate action provides core benefits. Multiple, feasible, and effective options are available to reduce GHG emissions and adapt to human-caused climate change. So the way forward, based on the IPCC report, Assessment Report 6, is climate resilient development. That said, what it entails is integrating measures to adapt to climate change with actions to reduce emissions in ways that provide wider benefits, improving people's health and livelihood, reducing poverty and hunger, clean energy, water, and air for all. So these are some of the reports of the 3 working groups in IPCC: Working Group 1, Working Group 2, Working Group 3. Working Group 1 talks about the physical sciences. Working Group 2 talks about adaptation and vulnerabilities. Working Group 3 talks about the mitigation aspects. There are also some special reports that you can find from the IPCC, and these are all, I have given links at the end of this lecture for you to address, or to you to access and read with respect to the bigger picture of the climate landscape which is currently going on. So climate change, civilizations and cities. I'm taking you through the human story of, how we evolved biologically and adapted to the changing climate, how we became climate resilient. So in this story, the next phase is about the Earth's climate is in a near constant state of flux. So for example, for the last 650,000 years, there have been 7 ice age cycles that has resulted in environmental instability for all ecosystems. This environmental instability is what causes the extinction of animals and people. So adapting to this is absolutely critical, and we have been lucky, throw of dice, the changes that have taken place with respect to the changing climate has been lucky for us. So we, as a species, out of all the mammals and apes, adapted best to the recent changing climate. For example, going back about 100,000 years, the apes adapted so well that you could define our planet as the planet of the apes. There were at least 5 different kinds of hominids that walked the earth belonging to our genus, Homo. By this time, Homo sapiens were living in Africa. We were the new kid on the block. We hadn't started going out to the rest of the world by this time. Our distant cousins, the Neanderthals, who are now extinct, were living in Europe and Western Asia. East and Southeast Asia were occupied by another set of cousins who were also known as Denisovans. Homo erectus lived in Indonesia after a span of about 1 million years of existence, over 1 million years. And along with Homo erectus lived the hobbit, Homo florensiensis. So with this sort of backdrop, you could just picture that, we were, back then, we were the planet of the apes. And right now, we are the last man standing. Homo sapiens are the only Homo species alive today. So there are all these other hominids became extinct over the last couple of thousands of years. So climate change then resulted in endemic agriculture that we took on as Homo sapiens to ensure food security. And this is an interesting part of our story where different civilizations first sprang up with based around this agricultural, abundance and food security. So maize, they sprang up individually across the world. So maize for pre-Columbian civilization was the reason for their cities. Rice for Asian civilizations, wheat and barley for the first Western and a little bit of Eastern civilizations were the bedrock of civilization. So food security was the bedrock of civilization. So climate change was directly and indirectly responsible for the collapse of then not so resilient, climate resilient, these new cities and the new civilizations. So they're directly responsible for the collapse of the Bronze Age. And there are examples globally going back about 1000 BC. affected, some of the civilizations affected were Mycenaean Greece, the Hittite Empire of Western Anatolia, Middle Assyrian Empire of Mesopotamia, New Kingdom of Egypt. Today, climate change enhanced by anthropogenic activities plays an equally important part of our existence as before. Rising global temperatures causes sea level rise, increase the number of extreme weather events such as floods, droughts, and storms, and increases the spread of tropical diseases. All these have costly impacts on cities' basic services, infrastructure, housing, human livelihood, and health. Two of the main outcomes of COP28, Conference of Parties, every year, Conference of Parties is programmed by the UNFCCC as the biggest event, which talks about the climate with respect to all the governments ratified under the UNFCCC system. And two of the main outcomes of COP28, which was held in Dubai last year, were the new funding for loss and damage, which is disaster risk reductions, and affiliated damages with respect to climatic conditions of floods, droughts, and so on and so forth, and enhancing global efforts to strengthen resilience. So this leads me to the next page of our lecture, which is basically on definitions. So what is sustainability? What is resilience and what is adaptation? In a nutshell, sustainability is the avoidance of the depletion of natural resources in order to maintain an ecological balance. Resilience is the ability to thrive in the face of change. Resilience is a feature, while sustainability is a goal. So bear in mind, every species on Earth is competing for finite, limited natural resources on Earth, for its existence, and so are we. This competition is what Darwin named as the survival of the fittest. And that's what led to 99% of the animals that has lived on this earth have come and gone. So they've tried to adapt, and at some point that adaptability has caused, it was not enough, and they ended up being extinct. So as for us humans, our population has doubled over the last 40 years. There are two people now competing for the same resources that one person competed 40 years ago. For example, your father competed with half the abilities of what you're competing right now. So the comfort zone of Earth is set to be around 3 billion people sustainably that it can support. Thus, with 8 billion people and rising right now, sustainability plays a vital part of our futures. To add to this mix comes the anthropogenic changing climate variable of the future. So you have a massive task ahead of you with your jobs and opportunities to combat this and to bring about a better future. So how does adaptation, climate change adaptation, relate to sustainability? Adaptation is the adjustments to decrease vulnerability of communities, nations, and regions to climate variability and change in promoting sustainable development. Hope these definitions are making sense with respect to the story I am taking you through of our blueprint as the best adaptive species to the changing climate. I would like to relate the following story that might give us a better understanding of adaptation. How our species adapted to its surroundings through speed can be seen through this 20,000 years old footprint in the mud. This footprint was left by an Aboriginal hunter that crossed a muddy wetland in Mungo National Park, New South Wales, Australia, some 20,000 years ago. The speed analysis of the hunter's footprints computes to running at speed of 37 kilometers an hour in the mud barefoot. Usain Bolt, in his 100-meter world record of 9.58 seconds, reached an average speed of 37.6 kilometers per hour on a track with shoes and all modern preparations. Back then, 20,000 years ago, we had to run in order to find food to see a tomorrow. Necessity is very special. And either we adapt or we die. Those were the options available for our ancestors. Actually, it's not only the humans that have done this. Animals, mustering these great speeds. You could see, the cheetah, for example, runs at about 100 kilometers an hour. Recent studies show that it's slightly higher, 120 kilometers an hour. Merlion is the fastest, fastest animal alive, which is a fish in the sea that swims at about 140 kilometers an hour. So adaptation that took place in the sea is far more advanced, which has been happening for a longer period of time than on land. And you could see how speed is an adaptation tactic to survive. So 20,000 years ago, this hunt optimized speed within its genus traits of bipedalism running that enabled the species survival in its environment and ecosystem. Since then, we have lost this speed due to collective work, elimination of competing predators and megafauna, establishing food security, building of civilization, and use of brain-oriented work. We can only witness this adaptive speed inherent in our DNA in the Olympics. But I need to throw this in as well, which is natural selection was not always a matter of survival of the fittest, but also survival of those most adaptable to the changing environment. To see how climate change and local environments plays such a pivotal part of our existence. With that, I'd like to take you through the Green Climate Fund financing for climate resilience. The Green Climate Fund is the world's largest climate fund that accelerates transformative climate action in developing countries through a country-owned partnership approach and use of flexible solutions and climate investment expertise. It has executed over 270 projects globally, dispatched about 15 billion US dollars up to now since 2016, since the inauguration of GCF by UNFCCC and all countries at the Paris Agreement, serving the Paris Agreement. And it has worked in 130 developing countries. So it was set up by the UNFCCC in serving the Paris Agreement, which is the NDCs. NDCs are known as Nationally Determined Contributors, which are a list of contributions that each country has promised to reduce climate change impacts with respect to mitigation and adaptation. Those are the NDCs. So what GCF does is it supports developing countries in transition to low emission, climate resilient societies. So low emission part is the mitigation part and climate resilient part is the adaptation part. So serving as a hub of the climate finance landscape globally is what GCF does. It's based in Incheon, South Korea, headquarters, and it operates globally with respect to helping developing countries achieve their Paris Agreement targets through their NDCs. So what is the focus of Green Climate Fund? The focus of Green Climate Fund is to work towards a sustainable green future by reducing emissions, which is the mitigation side of affairs. And how do you reduce emissions? By working on energy generation and access, by working on better transportation, greener transportation, using hydrogen, using electricity, electric vehicles, and using, so on and so forth. Building cities and industries and appliances which are not emitting, not emission heavy. So reduction of carbon dioxide is the indicator for mitigation. And forests and land use, which is, encouraging more forests that will absorb more carbon dioxide, which indirectly will assist in reduction of our overall global emissions. So reduction of fossil fuel, energy generation and access, reduction of our fossil fuels plays a massive part of, the mitigation focus. And moving into greener energies such as solar, wind, geothermal, hydropower, and so on and so forth. Ocean thermal and ocean waves, tidal energy, so on and so forth, hydrogen energy. Those are the energy generation options that would lead to stop burning fossil fuels. So in adaptation sense, the focus of GCF would be increasing of resilience, which goes hand in hand with the IPCC mission and future that IPCC has laid out as well with respect to science-based predicament. So increasing of resilience includes, the indicator for increasing resilience is mainly direct beneficiaries and indirect beneficiaries. So you're talking of number of people benefiting in different ways, which would adapt, showcase the adaptive potential of climate resilient action. So livelihood of people and communities, health, food and water security, infrastructure and the built environment and ecosystem services are the main focus areas of increasing of resilience. So this is the roadmap of how GCF tends to implement and support the nationally determined contributions that each country has promised to the Paris Agreement, along with the national action plans that each country has promised at the Paris Agreement. So these promises indicate reduction of mitigation and adaptation through adaptation and mitigation processes, the reduction of emissions as well as increasing climate resilience. So the implementing and investment planning of the GCF with respect to this, for countries to execute the NDCs and NAP, this is the whole structure of that work done by GCF. So first is the submission of the NDCs, which most countries have ratified with the Paris Agreement. And based on that, the implementing planning of these NDCs and NAP, which is the macroeconomic planning for the whole country, the national budgeting, sector and subnational planning, socioeconomic analysis, and action gap analysis, which the GCF helps out with respect to each and every country. So strengthening of institutional capacities is another very interesting, process that continues along all these, areas where GCF continues to actually assist and implement the investment plan. So third of this implementation and investment planning process for the countries is the evidence-based option identification. So the emission scenarios, climate risk and vulnerability assessments, option identification analysis and costing. Now this particular thing creates opportunity. Number 3, for example. Opportunities are systems level analysis and ID transformation key interventions, and options, methodologies responsive to other sort of things. So there are many things that the country think tanks can take out of this whole process and work together and request for funding and continue as it is. So number 4 is the investment planning stage, which is accessing of the funding needs, assess financing barriers, assess financing options and opportunities to optimize solutions for the barriers and comparative advantages of the financiers, sequence programs, and so on and so forth. Then the next stage is the public financing and the financial de-risking aspect, whether private financing would like to come in, what is the strength of private financing, policy de-risking, and so on and so forth, that the countries would work towards their betterment. 6th stage is the proposal development, which is the funding proposal development, project and financial structuring, investor roadshows, national budget prioritization. 7th is the implementing and monitoring of these projects. That then comes around with respect to opportunities of evidence of generation for revised NDCs. The NDCs can be revised, reprogrammed based on these sort of structures. So this is the main implementation and investment planning mechanism of the GCF for the countries per se. So the country, they work with NDAs of the country, which stands for National designated authority of the GCF. So they work together with the GCF country program and NDA and the NDCs and the NAPs that the countries possess, and they help the countries out with readiness grants. That's about $1 to $4 million, perhaps for 1 to 4 years, so that the countries align with capacitating and strengthening their institutional arrangements alongside that. So this is the bigger country framework that GCF has for the countries that have ratified the Paris Agreement, and they give tremendous support on these fronts. So there's a lot of areas where you could actually link with and do a lot of work. I myself have got involved with proposal development 6. I have done a proposal and given further feedback on this. And what I have done for Sri Lanka, for example, in 2022, the development of that country readiness proposal came through in 2023, and Sri Lanka is implementing it right now. So that's area over here. And GCF works. I will take you through the different arrangements of the working soon, so that you get a better idea of the landscape of GCF and its working arrangements. So this is the GCF project cycle, where there are 4 phases. Phase 1 is strategy and origination and structuring. Phase 2 is technical review and appraisal. 3 is approval and legal arrangements, and 4 is implementation. So within these 4 phases, there are 10 stages. So the first 3 stages are country entity work program, targeted project generation, concept note submission, are all based on phase 1, where the GCF works with the NDA. As I said, the NDA is the national designated authority of a country. Each country has their own NDAs. They execute, they are responsible for the national determined contributions that the country has promised to the Paris Agreement. And they work closely with the GCF country program, which actually is based on achieving the Paris Agreement. So they work with the GCF in strengthening that. So stages 1, 2, and 3 are all together with the NDA and the AEs. AEs are accredited entities. They are the organizations that are going to help implement, such as the UN organizations like UNDP, United Nations Environment Programme, and then GGGI, which is the Green Growth Institute based from South Korea. These are the accredited entities, IUCN. So there are many accredited entities that actually get involved in the design stage to help countries, iron out their NDCs and the Paris Agreement. And the GCF country program align it with the GCF country needs. So most of the programs that are generated are within this particular framework of affairs, and it's the accredited entities that provides technical support in actually developing these sort of projects and programs, so on and so forth. So the next stage is the technical review and appraisal part, which is done by the accredited entities, which has the technical capacities and know-how, and they do that, funding proposal development and funding proposal review for the country. So that is done here. And then comes the board approval processes, which is mainly GCF's Secretariat and ITAP work, along with the GCF board, where they approve the collectively approve the concept notes or the readiness proposals or the proposals, the proposals, not the concept notes, the funding proposal developments. First, the concept notes developed together with the AEs and the NDA in phase 1. And phase 2 is the funding proposal. And phase 3 is the approval of those funding proposals. Phase 4 is implementing of the funding proposal along with the accredited entity and the GCF and the country partnership. So that is the whole cycle. So there are many opportunities within this cycle to help execute these sort of big funded projects. Some projects are over 300, 400, 500 million dollars. And some projects are 25 million or less. Some projects are a few million. So it depends on the project you're asking for. And it has to ratify certain priorities, which I'm going to take you through. So the main important aspects of Green Climate Fund project proposals or concept notes is the climate rationale. So it has to be linked in the climate. So as I told you, there are mitigation focus areas and adaptation focus areas. If you're a mitigation focus area project, you have to make sure that it addresses the causes of climate change. The main driver of the climate change is the greenhouse the main driver of the climate change is the greenhouse effect. The human activities is increasing the concentration of GHG, atmospheric carbon dioxide, methane, nitrous oxide, and fluorinated carbon. So mitigation projects are generally based on how much of carbon dioxide reduction can take place. So that is the computing mechanism of a project. So with the current scenario of, burning fossil fuels, and if the project stops these burnings and saves the planet these emissions, that's what's going to that's what you call as climate rationale. So in this, the carbon dioxide produced by human activities is the largest contributor to global warming. So this is the indicator. So describing the mitigation needs and the GHG profile, describe most likely scenarios of GHG emissions trajectory, and how the project will shift the GHG emission trajectory. Addressing barriers to achieve this shift is the main mitigation climate rationale that you have to develop a GCF concept note that could have the legs to be proposed as a full proposal, which then, links with the country NDCs and the Paris Agreement commitments of that country. So adaptation projects are also based on similar indicator. As I told you, adaptation projects are based on the direct and the indirect beneficiaries of the project cycle for climate resilient, enhancing livelihood areas. So again, you need to address the consequences of the climate change. Activities shall be planned in response to climate-related problems, which might be aggravated by changes in weather parameters. Problems must be known, linked with climate change, and the solution shall be connected to the known climate-related problems. Projects must show causality between observed changes in the climate-related parameters in the territory and the impacts derived of those changes. So here's an example of a simple project that I developed a few years back, which is a sustainable Glycidia fuel wood sourcing project that incorporates female village coordinators to grow and harvest the gliricidia trees. As you know, the gliricidia wood, gliricidia grows really fast, and you could get about 10 kilos a year after the first few years of per tree, and that's the extent of gliricidia trees growth rate. And based on this, you could actually have a sustainable wood sourcing project that incorporates the female community in rural villages, that empowers pretty much it's a cross-cutting project that would save emissions. So it's a cross-cutting project it's a mitigation and adaptation cross-cutting project. So it saves emissions because sustainably sourced fuel wood is carbon zero, which is the tree takes the carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. About 98% of the carbon in the tree comes from the atmosphere, and when you burn it, it goes back to the atmosphere. So it's carbon zero. So based on that, the sustainable biomass for wood sourcing is carbon zero, which actually, you replace the emissions that you would pollute with that fossil fuel that is used instead of the fuel wood. So on that note, there is a saving of emissions that we put from the fossil fuel burning to the atmosphere. So on that note, the project emission reduction reduces about 58 kilotons of carbon dioxide a year. Each village coordinator reduces about 195 tons of carbon dioxide a year. And the environmental conservation that comes with it would be, you see, their leaves are used for nitrogen fixation, of agricultural soil, which is very, very healthy for the agriculture communities. It replaces, certain fertilizers and so on and so forth. Gliricidia plantation reduces soil erosion. Gliricidia tree reduces wind, soil erosions, and so on and so forth. So there's all these environmental, conservations that takes place. I'm not going to go through details, but these sort of things. Then the adaptation also creates a fantastic enhancing livelihood aspect of this, as well as, with this enhancing livelihood comes the climate resilient. They're ready with respect to, better equipped, better economically equipped with more, resilient approaches to the changing climate. And growing of trees is always beneficial. And so the climate impact adaptation directly benefits about 300 jobs as village coordinators and 16,500 indirect jobs as smallholder farmers and villagers. That comes as a side effect of this project. So enterprise development is another area, and it cross-cuts over 12 SDGs. And this, in a nutshell, is a fantastic little, proposal where gender empowerment, enhancing rural communities, climate mitigation and climate adaptation, benefits are felt with. So I'm just giving you an example of these sort of. So GCF, I could develop this proposal into a GCF project concept note first, and see whether it goes hand in hand with the NDA, and then NDA pretty much irons out certain priorities, whether it will ratify the NDCs that, for example, Sri Lanka has promised to the Paris Agreement, and within that the NDA issues a no objection letter And with that letter, we could pretty much develop a fully fledged concept note for the Green Climate Fund. And with that concept note approval, we could then go on to have a fully fledged funding proposal for the Green Climate Fund for Sri Lanka. So there's a small, insight of how it's done. So again, GCF investment criteria, I'm not going to go into details. So there are 6 GCF investment criteria. I put this slide so that you can read and understand it. These are very important aspects of a GCF concept note or a GCF proposal. So the impact potential, the paradigm shift, sustainable development potential, responsive of the recipient's need, promote country ownership, efficiency and effectiveness. These are the areas that pretty much, work with for GCF. So since most of you upon graduation will venture into the sustainability landscape, I would like to touch upon the guiding principles of sustainability, which are the environmental and social safeguards and standards. So GCF also adheres to this, and the GCF and the World Bank and the ADB and all the sustainability big organizations, they work on these sort of standards and safeguards to ensure that there is no, detrimental effect to the environment or society. So GCF incorporates environmental and social considerations into decision making, as all their projects are, you have to have these sort of principles and safeguards adhered to. And some of the principles, as you know, in their ESS is human rights, gender equality, child protection, climate change, biodiversity and ecosystems, and waste management. I think all of you are fully aware of these sort of environmental and social safeguards. The safeguard aspects of it is assessments and management of environmental and social risks, which are needed for all projects, stakeholder engagement, information and disclosure, which is also needed for all projects. Labor and working conditions, resource efficiency, community health. These are the other areas of safeguards that GCF will be eyeing and looking into based on what the project is about. So there are 3 types of risks. There is A or I1, which is high risk, B or I2, which is moderate risk, C or I3, which is low risks, as all projects affiliated with the safeguards are concerned, where you have to categorize them with respect to these sort of things. So for simplified approval financing modality, up to $10 million, for example, proposed projects should have little to no environmental or social risks and should belong to C or I3. So for the projects to go through, generally, ideally, it should be C or I3 category projects. So what GCF is once again looking at, in a nutshell, is summarized in this slide. There are 6 investment criteria, as I said: the country ownership, the climate impact potential, additional GCF financing, additionality of GCF financing, which is why GCF, clear baseline of why you're asking for the money, addresses barriers, clear impact of interventions, financing structure, and paradigm shifts relevance. 8 areas that are really prioritized is energy, transport, building cities, ecosystems, livelihood, health, forests and land use and infrastructure. So meeting the GCF policies also, as I discussed, is important. The standards, risk management, ESS, monitoring and evaluation and reporting, gender policy and legal standards. These are the GCF and the complete due diligence for the project, such as feasibility studies, financial models, project programming, gender analysis, environmental studies are what GCF is looking for. So in this section, Introduction to Adaptation Workshops, Tools and Platforms, I would like to share with you the work I am doing at the moment so that most of you will have a better idea of the work and applicable that are applicable upon graduation and what you can do for the greater landscape of climate change as a whole. So I come from the Regional Resource Center for Asia and Pacific, based in Bangkok. It is based, we were a part of UNEP Bangkok, UNEP Grid Bangkok since 1989 until 2015, and then we moved back to the university, Asian Institute of Technology. So, for example, APAN Forum started off in our office. There were IUC and regional headquarters started off in our office. So we have been an incubator for a very long time, since 1989. So what our services are mainly is capacity building, knowledge sharing, and technical services. We do comprehensive training programs. We do mentoring and post-training follow-ups. We develop knowledge products. We dialogue with webinars and side events and exhibits. We have technical and policy advice. We provide program, project design, and technical consultancies, and so on and so forth. Right now, our main focus area of the SDGs are SDG 13, climate action, SDG 11, which is sustainable cities and communities, SDG 4, which is quality education, SDG 17, which is partnerships for the goals, and SDG 7, which is affordable and clean energy. So climate change thematic areas of accessing climate finance. Mainly we work with climate finance, we work with adaptation planning, we work with disaster risk reduction, and we work with mitigation. So the climate change is, at RRCAP, is a very vibrant, very big section, department within the center. It has been instrumental in starting the APAN Forum, 8th APAN Forum, which is now with the UNEP. It started off in our organization, and but now we have nothing to do with that, but it tells you the history of the work we have done in Asia and Pacific in the climate change context. So we are listed as an adaptation fund provider of readiness since 2017 onwards. We have a couple of softwares that helps adaptation planning, such as SADS and FloodS. We have, we are listed as GCF framework for communities. So network and initiative organizations that we are engaging with is, we have observer status at UNFCCC, observer status in the GCF. We are Adaptation Research Alliance. We provide readiness support for Adaptation Fund, CTCN, GCF, GCF MBA, and PCCB. So we continue with the wide range of Asia and the Pacific. We continue with the regional workshops, continue with engagement of the youth, climate data downscaling, e-learning, GCF concept node development, diversified capacity building, and support project implementation. So this is what we do in a nutshell. So these are two recent regional training workshops we have concluded. Just for your information, we wanted to capacitate GCF concept nodes in the Pacific small island developing states, where we invited 19 participants of the NDA and the national concept node development teams from 7 countries in Fiji, Kiribati, Niue, Papua New Guinea, Solomon Islands, Tonga, and Tuvalu together. We worked across our partners together with the Pacific Climate Change Center and the Secretariat of Pacific Regional Environment Protection Organizations and Green Climate Fund, National Institute of Environment Studies in Japan, and funded by the Ministry of Environment, Japan. So the training workshop featured presentations, lectures, group exercise, hands-on training, one-on-one sessions, and sharing of documents and climate adaptation tools. This comprehensive program enabled participants to develop GCF concept notes for their countries. So this, the second workshop that I'd like to talk of, we have about 4 or 5 workshops like this per year, is the regional training workshops on building cities and resilience to climate disasters and risk. This we plan to actually also support with the IPCC report on cities, climate change in cities, where we could actually enhance these sort of regional, know-hows into the, IPCC, assessment reports, for example, and the special reports. So we invited 33 participants, 7 countries: Bangladesh, Cambodia, Indonesia, Malaysia, and Philippines, and Nepal, and Thailand. We worked with the UNDRR, IFRC, ICLE, UCLG, ADPC, UN Habitat, EPICNet, and funded by the Ministry of Environment, Japan. And the key outcomes of the workshop were develop city resilient action plans and roadmaps, and linking them with the existing wider city development plans, national DRR plans, and strategies and frameworks. So this is the sort of adaptation, climate change adaptation based climate enhancing climate resilient work we're doing in the region with respect to that. So we also have adaptation planning tools. One such tool is called S8 Downscaler, which is actually a tool to predict temperatures, precipitations, wind speed and direction, humidity, solar radiations, and sea level pressure based on what has happened before. So it's a downscaler model which works with the pseudo global warming method dynamic downscaling, developed by Tsukuba University, run by my center, which is Regional Resource Center at Asia, for the Asia and the Pacific, pretty much executing the science-based solutions. And so pretty much what it does is, for example, precipitation in Buriram province, Thailand by 2050. So predicting the precipitations based on current climatic downscaling, information, it will decrease by about 4 millimeters per day for the base year. So the daily maximum precipitation in Buriram province in mid-21st century, based on the RCP 4.5, is projected to be lower than current year in many areas. The decrease of rainfall might affect rain-fed agriculture, which contributes to 8-9% of the livelihood. These sort of, science-based solutions that can, justify a climate project is sought after by GCF and other sort of funding agencies. So these are the adaptation planning tools that you could use to actually build a substantial story of the climate resilient or climate aspect that you're looking at. Another software that we have for flood forecasting is called Flood S, developed by Hitachi Group, again with the help of Ministry of Environment, Japan. And this is to be used as adaptation planning, disaster risk reduction, river management, urban planning, and it can measure water depths, flow evaluation of countermeasures such as embankment. So this sort of softwares are very critical in flood mitigation and local government planning, and it can provide solutions like embankments, detention ponds, and diversion methods of core areas where actually is prone for large-scale disasters. So these sort of flood simulations, can be provided again for a climate resilient enhancing project. Disaster risk reduction, adaptation planning are huge in that aspect, and you can showcase how many lives that you could benefit, how much of damage that it can cause, and this is a very good loss and damage software that you can use for adaptation planning. Climocast is another software that we work closely with together. It's developed by NICE and it uses ME6509 climate projection tool that can quantify the temperatures, predict the temperatures of the future locality. It's based on the IPCC SSP low emissions model, SSP 126 and SSP 370 high emissions model. So it will give you results that, if you go on as usual, how much of temperature increase will happen in your locality, province, town, or country. And there's a series of tutorials to take you through this. And it gives you a prediction of what can happen in the future if you don't do anything now. So here's an example that we used in a GCF concept note for Gorontalo province, Indonesia, using Climocast. And the predictions actually denotes that by 2050, 2 degrees, it will increase, the temperatures of the locality will increase by 2 degrees, and pretty much by 2090 by 3 degrees. And the precipitation in districts would increase by 0.8 to 1.2, and thus we can relate to vulnerabilities and impacts of what it can actually really come up to, and pretty much ask for GCF funding to execute the project proposal. So it builds a very good science-based rationale, climate rationale for all projects here. So APPLAT is another knowledge management platform that is developed for Asia Pacific adaptation platform that gives you a wealth of information, again, on scientific information, knowledge creation, tool development, capacity development, and it provides data and information. I think you can go through them as it is. It pretty much talks about an adaptation database. It does visualizations of climate scenarios. It has many e-learnings that even my organization has contributed to with APPLAT. And with that, I come to the e-learning courses that we have contributed to APPLAT on locally led adaptation. Now, adaptation is something that is very, very interesting, and you need to do it at a local level. And integrating gender and indigenous factors into local-led adaptation is one such, course that we have developed. You can find it in pretty much, e-learning adaptation courses here, and you can find it in APPLAT as well as in RRC website. The next e-learning course that we have done is on pretty much FLOODIS, which is also very interesting, and it takes you through how to design these sort of things, how to run the tool and learn from it, and so on and so forth. This is the e-learning hub of AIT RRCAP that I have listed here, which you could also go and see. The wealth of information on adaptation and climate resilience and what it is and what local-led adaptation really is. Locally led adaptation is very important because there's something that we all can learn from locally led adaptation. So locally led adaptation to combat climate change is the most impactful form of addressing climate resilience. With this, I come to my last slide. In matching the human biological adaptation made thus far, it proves that locally led adaptation is the best way forward. All arrows direct to locally led adaptation. And today, us humans carry various skin-deep physical differences amongst us. Each of these differences convey a story of how we directly or indirectly found locally led biological solutions through generations of natural selections and gene mutations to combat the local environments and changing climates. Our physical differences are testamentary to our species' legacy of finding solutions to climate change adaptation and the enhancement of climate resilience. So these are the resources that I have in store, and we have the IPCC assessment reports, IPCC reports that you can find, Green Climate Fund approved projects, Green Climate Fund concept node databases, Green Climate Fund concept node templates, GCF programming manuals, and Green Climate Fund environment and social safeguards, the World Bank environment and social safeguards. With that, I thank you all, and knowledge is knowing that tomato is a fruit. Wisdom is knowing not to put it in a fruit salad. So I hope you all developed in wisdom, and I managed to create some insight in you through this lecture. Thank you all.